Greetings, everyone. Welcome to Anime Dreams, the ultimate hub for all things anime fanfiction. Today's topic is, what if time and reality collide for a female Naruto? Disclaimer. The content shared on this channel is intended solely for entertainment and discussion. I do not own any anime footage featured in my videos. All rights and credits belong to their respective creators and copyright holders. Now, let's dive right in. Their final confrontation unfolded where it all began, the Valley of the End. Long before their battle 4 years ago, the valley had undergone changes, and now, once again, it was nearly unrecognizable. Uzumaki Naruto gazed at her closest friend, and perhaps more, had circumstances been different, with a look of sorrow. Tears threatened to spill from her eyes, but she remained determined. Anyone who knew Naruto would attest that giving up wasn't in her nature, it wasn't even in her vocabulary. She had fought so hard for him, and yet they stood at the brink of disaster. She knew that Sakura and Kakashi, the only ones not trapped in the Mugen Tsukuyomi, wouldn't reach them in time. Her golden hair, stained red, mirrored the color of her clan, reminding her of her mother's legacy. Since meeting the fragment of her mother's soul within the seal, Naruto had felt a sense of longing for her mother's beautiful, red hair. It was long, vibrant, and something Naruto had come to admire. Ever since that meeting, she'd grown her hair out as a tribute to her mother. While she resembled Kushina in many ways, there was no mistaking her father's influence in her bright blue eyes and golden blonde hair. Beside her, Sasuke groaned, his arm in a similar condition to hers, severed just above the biceps. Despite the pain, they tried not to move too much, though with every passing moment, the hope of rescue faded further. "They're too far away, aren't they, Naru?" Sasuke asked, his voice strained, and Naruto managed a bitter chuckle, even though it made her body ache more. "Yeah." A voice broke through her thoughts. "You make me sick sometimes, brat. It's not over yet." Kurama's voice echoed in her mind, the half of him she still had still conscious, still listening. Naruto's eyes widened in surprise, she hadn't thought he was awake or paying attention. "Focus, Naruto. Grab the Uchiha, then channel your remaining chakra. The rest is on me. You and the Uchiha will be fine, but don't make a habit of dying." Kurama's tone left no room for argument. Naruto, too weary to argue back, simply nodded. She had promised Sasuke she would keep fighting, and she would, but there was a difference between stubbornness in the face of a best friend and stubbornness with a bijou. As pain shot through her, Naruto swayed, struggling to hold herself up. Sasuke glanced at her, his eyes wide. "What are you doing? What does it look like?" She gasped, rolling onto her side. Her remaining arm reached out toward the one person who meant more to her than anyone else. She managed a painful smile, coughing up blood. "I'm saving us." Sasuke froze as Naruto crawled toward him, carefully positioning herself so that she could curl up beside his bloodied side. She avoided his wound, but even in his pain, Sasuke couldn't ignore how much more intense Naruto's suffering must have been. With effort, she lifted her blood-streaked face, offering him a forced but bright smile. Her eyes shone, even through the pain. If he moved just a little, lowered his head, he could kiss her. He didn't, but part of him wished he could. "Kurama says he can save us," Naruto explained. "We just need to focus all our remaining chakra, and he'll take care of the rest." "Are you sure?" Sasuke asked, his voice laced with doubt. "We don't have much chakra left, and I'll barely be able to activate my Sharingan." "I'm sure," Naruto replied with determination. Sasuke sighed, looking up at the sky. "What do we have to lose?" Together, they focused their chakra, and a fiery shroud enveloped them. Their energy intertwined, fiery orange and purple, crackling with lightning as power from all 9 bijou surged to their aid. In a blinding flash and a thunderous crack, they vanished. The only trace they had existed was the blood left behind on the ground. Soon, even that would disappear. And as they disappeared, the world began to unravel, tearing itself apart, as if it had never been there at all. The bright sunlight was the first thing Naruto saw when she opened her eyes again. The rays were sharp as she lay there, blinking up at the clear morning sky. The colors of the sky were a mix of yellow, orange, and dark red, reminiscent of the Uzumaki clan's hair, and they bathed the area in a warm, fiery glow. As she tried to make sense of her surroundings, she realized she was lying uncomfortably on uneven ground, her hand gently holding Sasuke's. He was still unconscious beside her. Aside from the blinding sunlight, Naruto noticed something curious: she felt no pain. Her body was sore, as if weighed down by a force much stronger than usual, but the pain of her injuries was gone. Any bruises or cuts that remained were healing quickly. Sasuke seemed to be in worse shape, lacking her fast healing abilities. Naruto glanced at her arms, and her eyes widened in surprise. She had both of them back. She flexed one in front of her to make sure it wasn't some illusion. To test it further, she pinched herself hard enough to draw blood. "Ow!" she yelped, as the sharp pain confirmed it was real. She could only assume this had something to do with Kurama, though too many factors were unknown to guess for sure. Looking over at Sasuke, she noticed his arm had returned as well. With some difficulty, Naruto pushed herself up despite her body's protests, and as she looked around, her breath caught in her throat. She was no longer in the Valley of the End. The place looked familiar, even though it had been years since she had seen it. The fallen buildings with Uzumaki spirals were a clear giveaway. She was in Uzushiogakure, the village of her ancestors, a place that had been in ruins for over 3 decades. She had visited the islands, which were once connected by bridges, during her journey with Jiraiya. To enter, she had needed to break through the barrier, which had been triggered by the death of the last Uzumaki in the village. The powerful seal killed anyone who entered as an enemy, preventing looting of the village's secrets. Though some things had managed to escape, most of the village's treasures remained untouched. They hadn't stayed long enough to explore the hidden knowledge within, leaving with only a few books on sealing techniques, mostly common knowledge. The village, though in ruins, was just as she remembered, partially intact but in disrepair, with only a few buildings still standing. The village, once mostly home to the Uzumaki clan, had also included a few small civilian families and minor ninja clans before it fell during the clan wars. Afterward, the islands became solely inhabited by the Uzumaki. Naruto noticed the river flowing through the village amid the destruction. The water was clear enough to see the riverbed, and in some parts, it was shallow enough for her to stand in. The sight of it reminded her of tide pools, which were rare in the land of fire. She couldn't help but feel the presence of her ancestors' spirit in the air. A voice broke her thoughts. "Dead last." She turned to see Sasuke's onyx eyes staring at her in surprise. For a moment, they simply locked eyes, and then Sasuke's gaze widened. It wasn't often that he looked startled, but seeing Naruto in good health, especially considering their near-death experiences, was a shock. Naruto noticed that Sasuke's usual sharp gaze wasn't focused on her blue eyes. Instead, they seemed to reflect a pale, almost glowing light. "Your eyes," Sasuke muttered. Naruto blinked and raised a hand to her face. "What? Is something wrong with them?" she asked, confused. Rising shakily to her feet, Naruto walked to the river and knelt beside it. When she looked down at her reflection, she gasped. It wasn't a dream, she murmured to herself. In her sleep, she had dreamed of an endless white void and a familiar figure, the Sage of Six Paths. Floating before her was a wise-looking man with a staff across his lap, his eyes full of both sympathy and pride. Beside him was another man who looked similar, but his eyes were a deep white, much like the Hyuga clan. He had long white hair and pale skin. "Hello again, children," the first man greeted them. Sasuke, his usual stoic self, blinked. "Are we dead?" he asked, almost as if expecting that answer. Naruto shot him a glare, narrowing her eyes. "We're not dead," she exclaimed, smacking him lightly on the back of the head. Sasuke looked at her, surprised by her reaction. He had thought their survival was impossible, but the fact that they were still conscious was already miraculous. Naruto, though, had an innate belief that they weren't dead. Sasuke nodded in agreement. Yeah, if we're not dead, why are we here? The man beside the sage smiled. The young Uzumaki is correct, he said. You are not dead. You've merely been brought here for now. If your bodies can hold out during the transition, you will survive. Naruto tilted her head, her curiosity piqued. Who are you? The man chuckled. I am Otsutsu Komura, the sage's younger brother. The Hyuga clan is descended from me. Naruto blinked, then grinned. Ah, I see the resemblance. Nice to meet you, old man, Dadabayo. Sasuke sighed, though it was almost fondly. Hagoromo chuckled at her antics, and Homura seemed unsure whether to be amused or mildly offended by Naruto's bluntness. Where are we? Naruto asked. 1 minute we're on the verge of death, and then Kurama offers to save us. Now, we're here. You're here so we can explain a few things and make the transition easier for both of you, Hagoromo said kindly. The technique Kurama used was a special jutsu that Homura and I developed. It's a space-time ninjutsu meant to reverse time. When we were young, we used it to avoid trouble with our mother or other caretakers. Over time, we perfected it and made it a part of our fighting style. It sounds a bit like Izanagi, Sasuke noted. It is similar to Izanagi, Homura responded. In fact, it can be considered a larger version of Izanagi. However, there are no illusions involved, and instead of reversing just a few moments, it can reverse entire years. Naruto and Sasuke exchanged knowing glances. You don't mean to say this technique will take you back in time? Hagoromo nodded. That's exactly what it does. When I was younger, I created a stronger version of this technique. Unlike the original, which only reversed a few hours, this one could take us back days. The only problem was that even I couldn't use it to go back further than a year after splitting the Jubi into the 9 Bijou. By that time, I was near the end of my life and had no need for it. My only regret was the war between my children. Why did Kurama know about it, and how did he use it? You mentioned you weren't strong enough to send us back more than a year. So how and when did Kurama send us? Naruto asked. I foresaw it might be necessary if something bad happened to the children of prophecy. You weren't supposed to die today, but without your teammate to save you, you would have died from the injuries you sustained. It was your willpower and desire to live that helped you survive your final attacks. Hagoromo smiled and continued. I gave the jutsu to each of the Bijou and taught them how to use it. They each had the ability to reverse time, but alone, they could only go back a few months or years depending on their power. I doubt Kurama alone could have sent you both back more than a year. If Naruto were alone, perhaps 2 or 3 years. What Kurama did was contact the other Bijou and asked for their help. With their power, your chakra, and the time-space abilities of Sasuke's dojutsu, Kurama was able to send you both even further back. We saw what was happening and decided to assist, Homura added. We helped heal your most serious wounds and sent you even further into the past. Without our help, you would have only been sent back around 12 years, to the time of your academy days. With our assistance, you traveled much farther back. Unfortunately, this comes at a price, Hagoromo said solemnly. The overwhelming chakra and the act of traveling so far back in time caused a disturbance in the future. Nature's way of maintaining balance is that when one future is altered, another timeline is created in its place. It's like an equivalent exchange. Naruto's eyes widened, and tears filled them as she thought of everyone left behind. Tsunade, Hinata, Kakashi, and Sakura, although she wasn't sure if Sakura had survived the battle with Kaguya. There were so many others she couldn't name off the top of her head, but she still felt guilty for what had happened. Sasuke, meanwhile, was deep in thought, unsure of how to feel. His mind went to his teammates, Team Taka, Kakashi, and even Sakura. Don't feel too bad about the fate of that timeline, Naruto, Homura said, trying to comfort her. It may be gone, but now you have the chance to build a better future. One with less death, where things can unfold as they should. I should warn you, though, This jutsu is unpredictable. Timelines are never entirely certain, so some things may not be the same as they were before. Thanks, Naruto murmured, grateful but still overwhelmed. For giving us this chance. Sasuke nodded in agreement, though he remained silent, his mind racing with possibilities. There was so much they could change, but knowing how to change it depended on where and when they landed. Either way, they couldn't just walk into Konoha. Even in peaceful times, there was a process for newcomers. Before you wake. There's one more thing I want to discuss with you, Naruto, Homura said, stepping forward. My descendants created the Hyuga clan. I'm sure you know this. But what I really want to ask is, what do you know about your father's family? Naruto realized she didn't know much about either her mother or father's side of the family, beyond a few small details. Naruto shook her head as memories rushed through her mind. Homura had shared some details about her family history. Her father was the son of Namikaze Ryu, who had been an orphan, born to a wandering ninja named Namikaze Kyo and Hyuga Hibari, a member of the Hyuga clan's main family. Hibari had been disowned after it was discovered she was pregnant by a wandering ninja she met on a mission. When Hibari was 8 months pregnant, she went into early labor and gave birth to Namikaze Ryu. He had bright blonde hair and blue eyes, which were not typical of the Hyuga clan, who were known for their white eyes, the Byakugan. The elders and Hibari's parents believed Ryu lacked the Byakugan because of his mixed heritage. Hibari passed away soon after giving birth due to complications. Her sister always suspected the Hyuga clan elders and their father had punished Hibari with her death for dishonoring the family, though there was no concrete proof. Ryu, without the Byakugan, was abandoned in an orphanage. The Hyuga clan, disappointed that he lacked the signature eyes, decided to sever ties with him. They never considered the possibility that the Byakugan could appear in Ryu's descendants. Perhaps it wouldn't have, but the potential remained. Ryu's son and granddaughter didn't have the Byakugan, but the bloodline and potential were still there. The elders never taught the descendants how to awaken the Byakugan, unlike the Sharingan, which manifested under extreme circumstances. Ryu grew up, became a ninja, and married Senju Bara, a civilian woman with Senju blood. They had one child, Namikaze Minato. Sadly, both Ryu and Bara died during the Second Great Ninja War, leaving their 2-year-old son an orphan. Minato later married Uzumaki Kushina, and together they had a daughter, Uzumaki Naruto. Though her Hyuga blood was distant, Naruto now had the white eyes of a Hyuga, along with the chakra Homura had granted her. She wasn't sure why her eyes had changed, especially since she believed she could have used the Byakugan without the peculiar appearance. Perhaps it had something to do with Hagoromo's chakra. If she and Sasuke were in a different time period, their new identities might be easier to create, since she no longer resembled her father. Although she wasn't a prodigy, Naruto knew they couldn't simply walk through the elemental nations as Uzumaki Naruto and Uchiha Sasuke. The realization of what had happened seemed to leave them frozen in place, unable to move or speak. They had narrowly escaped a life-threatening situation, saved only by the bijou. Still processing the incredible events, they were trying to grasp the truth of their survival and the fact that Kurama had used a rare and mysterious kinjutsu to send them back in time to an unknown period. Naruto had a strong sense that they were on the main island of Uzu no Kuni, the land of whirlpools. "Any idea where we are?" Sasuke asked, breaking the silence that had weighed heavily on them. Naruto glanced at the Uchiha, noticing his conflicted expression as he looked at his restored arm. It seemed as though he was struggling with emotions tied to it, as if it was a symbol of past struggles. She hoped he wouldn't take any drastic actions, trying to rid himself of it in an effort to redeem himself. "I have a guess," she replied. She took a step away from the water, careful to avoid the fallen stones, her face turning slightly grim when she saw a skeletal hand emerging from the rubble. Whether it belonged to a fallen ancestor or an enemy, she didn't want to know. "I think we're in the land of whirlpools. This used to be Uzushiogakur, the village where my mother and clan came from." Sasuke surveyed the surroundings, taking in the widespread destruction. Standing next to Naruto, he recognized the same signs. Uzumaki spirals marked the remnants of the buildings. That symbol was known only to two villages in history, Uzushio and Konoha. "Is Kurama still with you?" he asked. Naruto frowned, her hand instinctively resting on the spot where her seal had been. She hadn't heard from Kurama at all since waking up. Perhaps the fox was just resting, as the sage had mentioned that the technique required an immense amount of chakra. "I'm not sure yet. I'll check later, but he's not responding, so he might be asleep. The jutsu probably wore him out." Sasuke nodded. "We'll have to figure this out on our own then." "Well, we already know we can't be more than 20 or 25 years in the past. This isn't a battle site, there are bones, not bodies," Naruto pointed out with a small frown. "Uzushio was gone at least a decade ago." Good point. We should explore the village. There might be hidden rooms or information that wasn't taken when the village fell, Sasuke said. "You should make some clones and send them out to gather information. Just be sure to use a disguise." Naruto furrowed her brow, running a hand through her long, golden hair, which had fallen from its pigtails. Her hair was a distinct shade of blonde only seen with the Yondaime Hokage. Even the Yamanaka clan had a slightly different blonde. Her eyes would make anyone think she was a Hyuga, and even though her appearance resembled her father less, she still looked unmistakably like Namikaze Minato. She could use a transformation, but she needed something more lasting. She didn't plan to hide her eyes forever. They'd need to come up with their stories soon. "Right," she said, crossing her fingers. 20 clones appeared. "Transform into random civilian appearances, it's safer since we don't know what time period we're in. Go out and find everything you can about when we are. Once you've gathered all the information, come back. 5 of you should try sneaking into the hidden villages for more intel, but don't give yourselves away." "Got it, boss," one clone replied. In an instant, all the clones transformed. There were shades of black, brown, and blonde hair, with eyes ranging from dark to pale. One thing they all had in common was their petite frames, which stood in stark contrast to Naruto's more athletic, kunoichi build. "Good luck," Naruto murmured as the clones headed off. Once that was taken care of, she and Sasuke made their way through the village. Some sections were blocked by fallen stone, but they managed to clear the path or find another way around. Sasuke's Sharingan and Rinnegan were useful, and Naruto's Byakugan also helped, though it took her a while to remember what Hinata had told her about activating it. After some trial and error, the veins at her temples became more pronounced, and her vision cleared dramatically, making her almost lose her balance and fall into the river. Sasuke was immediately by her side, his arm around her waist to steady her. Given the chilly breeze, they both guessed it was nearing winter. Konoha rarely saw snow, but Uzushio was farther north and likely experienced more snowfall and colder weather. "Thanks," Naruto said, a faint blush crossing her whiskered cheeks. It was a bit awkward. The last time they'd been this close had been during their final battle, when he had been trying to defeat her. Before that, it was probably back during the mission to the Land of Waves. "No problem," Sasuke muttered. "So, what do you see?" Standing up, Naruto surveyed their surroundings until her eyes caught sight of a structure still mostly intact about 30 feet away. It was a clan compound with low stone walls and an archway leading into it. The walls were crumbling, and part of the wall was broken down, along with some of the structures inside. What stood out to her were the unmistakable Uzumaki spirals carved into the stone walls and a large metal spiral at the center of a rusted gate. It was the best preserved area she had seen in the village so far. "I think I found the Uzumaki compound." The Uzumaki compound provided only a little more insight than the rest of the village at first. The buildings were aging and falling apart, yet many stood tall with little damage the deeper they ventured into the compound. Naruto suspected the preservation of these structures was due to the seals her Byakugan had detected, still faintly glowing with chakra. When she glanced at Sasuke, she noticed he had also observed the seals, his Rinnegan catching the subtle energy. At the end of the compound stood the largest and most intact building. Its traditional architecture, grand in size, could only be called a mansion. Of all the buildings, this one had weathered the years the best. Upon entering, They realized it was indeed the home of the clan leader's family, and likely had been for generations. Inside, the house was far from well kept. Dust lay thick across every surface, and cobwebs clung to the corners. In the kitchen, remnants of the last meal were still at the table, now reduced to decay by time. Naruto gasped when a rat scurried out from under the sink and across the stove. On the walls, there were pictures of the clan leader's family and past generations, many of which were unfamiliar to her. A pang of sorrow filled her chest when she realized this had once been her mother's home. It became even clearer as they moved down the hall to the bedrooms. The first door on the right was marked with a sign that read, Kushina, Kushina. "This was my mother's room," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Sasuke paused in front of the next door, which led to a bathroom. He glanced back at her as she slowly turned the knob and pushed the door open. Abandoning his own path, he followed her inside. The room inside was typical for a girl's space, though covered in layers of dust and cobwebs. A desk leaned against the room's single large window, offering a beautiful view of the hills of Uzushio, where one could watch the sunrise or sunset. On the right side of the room, away from the desk, stood a bed with an abundance of fluffy pillows, making Naruto smile. She had a similar fondness for pillows. Her apartment had once been filled with them before she finally acquired a proper bed and furniture. The walls were aged, now appearing mustard yellow rather than the soft yellow they once were. The furniture, desk and dresser, was made of dark wood, likely mahogany. A bookshelf held mostly children's books, though there were also scrolls and history books. Small trinkets decorated the shelves, along with a few well-worn stuffed animals. Several framed photos were scattered about as well. Walking over to the bed, Naruto picked up a simple black metal frame adorned with red spirals at each corner. The picture showed her mother's family, likely taken shortly before Kushina left Uzushio. In the photograph, Kushina stood in front of an older couple with her arm around a slightly older girl. The couple had dark red hair, shaggy for the man and long and straight for the woman, and violet eyes like Kushina's. The older girl, about 11 years old, wore a sleeveless orange kimono and an Uzushio forehead protector. She had shaggy hair that reached her waist and was happily smirking at the camera while playfully giving Kushina bunny ears. What caught Naruto's attention was that the older girl had one violet eye and one blue eye, just like her. Sasuke, noticing the resemblance between the individuals in the photo and Naruto, spoke up. "Your grandparents, mother, and aunt?" he guessed. The older girl certainly shared Naruto's taste in colors and had the same eye and facial structure. Turning the frame over, Naruto found kanji on the back. It read, Uzumaki Kenshin, Hotari, Aiko, and Kushina. The word spring was also written there. "Yeah," Naruto said softly, before slipping the photo into her pocket, just in case they wouldn't return. "Let's keep looking around." Next, they explored Uzumaki Aiko's room, which, while different in terms of furniture color and fewer books, had a similar layout to Kushina's room. The master bedroom was nearby, along with several guest rooms. However, one room caught their attention. It seemed to be lived in. The bed had pictures and covers scattered across it, and it appeared more personal than the other rooms. After some investigation, they discovered that the room belonged to Naruto's great-aunt, Uzumaki Benihime. A journal was their only clue to her identity, and it was striking how much she resembled both Naruto and Kushina. From the pictures, Naruto almost mistook her for her mother. But since Uzushio had fallen around the time her mother was a Junon, that was impossible. "We need to discuss our next steps," Sasuke suggested as they made their way to a large room in the back of the house. This room, likely her grandfather's study, had books and scrolls lining the walls, and a large desk sat at one end. A dusty couch and chair rested at the other end. They sat on the couch, with Benihime's journal in Naruto's hands. "We can't keep wandering around as ourselves, especially off this island," Naruto said with a sigh, rubbing the bridge of her nose. "And eventually, we'll need to leave if we want to stop Black Zetsu and Madara. We can only assume they're both around." "First things first, we need new names," Naruto continued. Sasuke nodded. "I've been thinking about that. I can go by Indra. It'll take some getting used to, but it works. Naruto snorted at the simplicity but nodded. Uchiha Indra. That works. But I won't go by Asura. No, it's up to you. You'll be the one living with it, Sasuke replied with a scoff. Naruto mulled it over. Her parents had named her Naruto with great meaning, and even though she was now a girl instead of the son they had expected, they had kept the name. It felt deeply tied to her identity, and she didn't want to lose that connection. She could use similar names, Naru, Narumi, Naruko, but none of those felt quite right, especially with another Naruto existing in this timeline. Instead, she thought about names with similar meanings. Since Naruto meant maelstrom, maybe something ocean-related. Nagisa, she finally said. I'll be Uzumaki Nagisa. Nagisa, meaning beach, shore, water's edge. Nagisa, Sasuke, now Indra, repeated, testing the name. It suits you. Naruto nodded. We should start calling each other by our new names, so we get used to them. Your new identity should be easy to establish, Naruto continued. We'll say you're an Uchiha born outside the village, maybe from someone who left, like Madara. Besides Madara, there aren't many Uchiha who would leave. I can think of only one, Uchiha Izana. She fled during the Second Shinobi War. Little is known about why, but the village considered her Kia, even though they never found a body. So, how do they know she fled? Naruto asked, intrigued. The clan detected traces of a Sharingan-based genjutsu on the returning member. I reviewed the records before leaving Konoha, but that's all the information I have. I know she was the granddaughter of Uchiha Madara, her appearance, her birth date, and that she's my father's cousin. Beyond that, my knowledge is limited, Indra explained. My mother is Uchiha Izana, and my father was an unknown member of the clan. She fled during the war due to pregnancy and her dislike of the fighting. She sought refuge in a smaller country that was less affected by the war until I was born. We traveled and eventually found our way to Whirlpool, where we stayed for a year before its destruction, which is when we met. My mother survived the war, but not long after, she passed away due to illness. That should be easy enough to remember. If my mother is still alive, she won't be able to tell whether it's true or not since she left when she was only 7, Nagisa said with a frown, flipping through Benihim's journal. The journal read like a memoir, detailing Benihim's life from the age of 9 until her untimely death at 31. Several entries caught Nagisa's attention, particularly those mentioning missions outside the village and a man with mesmerizing eyes, white eyes. The man was unnamed at first, but Nagisa speculated he was likely a Hyuga. Her suspicions were confirmed as she read further. March 23. I haven't been feeling well lately. Kenshin thinks I should see a doctor, but I think he worries too much. Hotari, my dear sister-in-law, agrees with him, but I've always had a strong immune system, something most Uzumaki are known for. So, I avoided seeing anyone. Until today. I finally visited a healer from our clan, which was a big step since chakra control is a challenging field for us. After explaining my situation, the healer was eager to assist, and to my surprise, though I think hers as well, the results were clear: I'm pregnant. But that's puzzling to anyone who knows me. I don't sleep around, I'm not married like most people my age, and I'm not in a relationship. My mind raced for another reason. I was going to be a mother. But I also knew who the father was, and his clan. I didn't expect much support from them. The Hyuga were known for being fiercely protective of their dojutsu, even more so than the Uchiha. I'll have to tell Jun and see what he thinks. If we need to, we'll keep it hidden, hoping the baby will take more after me and not have the Byakugan. Jun mentioned this isn't the first time something like this has happened, but it's extremely rare. We'll manage, though. It has to work out. I can use this, Nagisa said as she handed the journal to Indra. He skimmed it quickly. I see. You could claim to be the child of your aunt, but what about the real child they had? He asked. Keep reading, Nagisa instructed, Benihim discussed her plans with June to keep the situation secret from his clan. June didn't trust them, being a branch member, and didn't want their child to suffer the same fate he did. Unfortunately, they never needed to worry. A few weeks after Benihim found out she was pregnant, she miscarried. June died in the war shortly afterward. "And if your mother is still alive?" Indra asked, closing the journal. Nagisa shrugged. "We hope her memory isn't too sharp. She was very young when she left, and Benihim had already moved out when my mother was 6. By the time Benihim lost her child, my mother was only 5. She had just a short time left in Uzushio, so she probably wouldn't have noticed. We can say I was sheltered due to my Byakugan." "And your hair?" he asked. "I can use a special seal that Urosenin taught me. It activates recessive genes and makes them dominant. So, it will bring out my mother's red hair while suppressing my father's coloring," she replied. Indra nodded, brushing his hand through his hair. "We should rest and maybe find some clothes and food." Nagisa agreed, and Indra left the room. She made her way to her aunt's room, where she searched the closet for clothes in her size. Many of the items were worn, but a few kimonos seemed well preserved thanks to sealing techniques. She chose a dark orange and red kimono and left the room behind. Dear Anime Dreams family, that's all I have for this part. Stay tuned for more exciting content coming your way. Thank you for your continued support. Best regards. Anime Dreams.